Welcome to Skyler Jarvis Media.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Skyler Jarvis.
What's up, everybody? This is the Skyler Jarvis Show. I'm your host, Skyler Jarvis, and today we're doing a boss rant. So, before I talk about anything, I just want to thank everybody for the overwhelmingly positive support that I've been getting on this series. And y'all really make me want to do good podcasts like this. And, really try to strive hard for what to talk about. Different things to talk about. And so this is going to be the second to last episode of Blind Lives Matter. I mean, we'll be doing different, at different times we'll be doing different Blind Lives Matter episodes and whatever. If somebody wants to get on the podcast and whatever and do and tell their story, they can. It's always open, regardless if it's November or October or a little bit in November, even December, January, whatever time of year you want to do it, man. So I want to shout out all the guests that's been on here, man. For the past few weeks, I mean, the guests I've had on here. The guests I've had on here are, they were spectacular. They brought, each and every one of them brought something new and something interesting to the table. So, we talked about really the same things, but the point of all of this was to make people aware that this is happening not only in Taylorsville, not only in Charlotte and the surrounding areas and blah, 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 Scooby-Dooby-Doo. It's happening all over the world. It's happening in California, for Pete's sake. It's happening in South Carolina. So, it's not just me, and I think it's this podcast has woke a lot of people up in that regard. And you guys don't know how much I really appreciate the support and everybody sharing it on their Facebook pages. Abby, Dylan, Natasha, all posted their, posted Facebook posts about it and put the link up there. Y'all don't know how much that means to me. I mean, the fact that this is getting anywhere means the world to me. And by the way, shout out to everybody that's been here from day one. I want to thank all of y'all because I've got 74 subscribers now. I've got some of my videos like have 200, 300 views. So y'all don't know how much that means to me. So what I want to talk about is I want to make this episode more fun and, making people aware of different things that blind people do that, that's fun, that other people look at, sighted people might look at and be like, well, that's different. That's cool. So, me and Chase got in, we dabbled in it, on the last podcast. By the way, for those of you who haven't checked out that podcast with Chase, check it out. Spread every one of these podcasts around. We need to get more people on board. So I've been watching Game of Thrones. Now, a lot of people ask me, Skyler, how do you watch movies? If you can't see what's going on, how are you able to sit down and watch a movie? Well, we use something called audio description. Now, this can be found on multiple platforms. It's sometimes it's included on the disc, if you get the disc version of it. And then Apple TV is known for having it. Netflix is known for having it. Hulu is supposed to have it, by the way, and we tried. We honestly tried to put audio description on for Hulu, and it didn't work. So what audio description is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically an audio track over the video. Like, you can still hear the video in the background. You still hear the movie and everything that's going on. But there's a voice track over it explaining what's going on. And, like different things, like when people stop talking, or even sometimes when people are talking, like if there's a lot going on in a scene, they're trying to describe everything possibly on the screen, and even in audio description, like, they miss a lot of stuff. But it gets the main point across. It gets it makes it where blind people can sit down and watch movies or TV shows. And HBO has it. I actually sat down and watched the new Salem's Lot movie, which honestly I'm kind of torn between. But that's beside the point. HBO has it. So I've been watching a Game of Thrones, or Game of Thrones. That's the TV version. So, I'm not that big of a fantasy nerd, to be honest with you. Like, I've read, dipped my toes into it, like, Harry Potter, a little bit of Percy Jackson, a little bit of young adult fantasy books. And then I started getting into Stephen King, and that was all, and then I started reading The Dark Tower, and that was my first real, like, adult fantasy series. And now I'm starting on this, so it's been quite a journey. And by the way, shout out to Carol, and shout out Audio Vault. Now, everybody that's watching this podcast, go check audiovault.net out. So what it is, it's basically a place where you can get all kinds of audio described movies, TV shows, everything. You get everything. I've got a bunch of movies off there, and We Need It's a Wonderful Life on there, by the way. Anybody can find audio description for that one. We need it. But anyway, audiovault.net is a website that you can go on, and you can download the MP3 files of the movies or TV shows you want. TV shows, when you download them, they come in zip files, so you kind of gotta, especially if you're on an iPhone, you kind of gotta time it out right, or else it won't download. So I sat down and I got all of the Game of Thrones seasons from Audio Vault, and I got all the Stranger Things, and I put them on flash drives. And that's what I like to do, because a lot of people will be like, well, why do you just listen to the audio version? Why because I can't see, and this is the only way, this is the only way I can really get a hold of audio described movies without having to go on Apple TV and pay for them all, So, and it's not, it's not free to take away the rights of this, of the movies and everything. It's just, promote audio, or it's just, it's got a lot of audio described movies. That way it's easy for blind people to go and, get their movies off of that, and they can watch it, And it's even better like that because you imagine what's going on in your mind instead of watching it on screen. You see what I'm saying? So, yeah, Audio Vault's pretty cool. I've got a lot of stuff off of it. So that's something, my mama we have Netflix at our house, and a few years ago my mama, I come in there and watch some movies with her, and she would put it on audio description. And then I came in the bedroom about a few days later, and she still had it on audio description. And, a lot of sighted people get really tired of that really quick, especially if a blind person's not in the room. They're just like, well, I just don't want to listen to this voice track all over the thing. But I come in, and I ask Mama, I'm sitting here like, what? I'm like, do you still have it on audio description? Have you not got tired of that yet? She's like, no, I like sitting there watching it with audio description because if I go to the bathroom, I'm not missing anything in the movie. I can still basically hear what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, I never thought of it that way. And see, that right there is how sighted people can take blind things and make it their own. They can use it to their own advantage. And that's cool. That is so cool, man. Shout out to Chase and Crib, by the way. We need to get you on the podcast, man. Whenever you got some time during the weekends, man, we need to get you on here. Let you tell your story, man. Because I want to hear a lot of stuff about, your adventures at GMS. So, some of my experiences, I'm gonna go in depth about some more of my experience as as a visually impaired student growing up in public school. Now, I kind of wanted to keep this fun, but we gotta talk about it in some length because it is Blind Lives Matter series. So when kindergarten, hit, when I grew up, I really didn't know I was blind, because that was my world. I didn't know no better, and I didn't have vision before this, so I couldn't really compare to other people. So what made it difficult for me, especially like the elementary years, everybody stayed on my case. Everybody got the work I needed, and they brailled it out, whatever we needed. So when sixth grade came, that was really the turning point where teachers kind of started taking advantage of me being blind and shipping me off to one room. Well, I mean, that didn't start until 7th grade, but the 6th grade, I'll tell you one that I don't think I've talked about on the podcast before, but at the end of the 6th grade year, they had us go out to the ball field, near the campus. And we were, the sun was blazing hot, and they had us make ice cream in Ziploc bags. I remember it as clear as day. And we took it back, and of course, I mean, who doesn't like ice cream? As a kid, especially as a kid or teenager, that you love ice cream. So we took it back, and at this point, it wasn't even ice cream. I'm not going to lie to you. When I took mine back, at least, it was just a watery lump. I don't know how else to explain it. It was really watery because the sun, was beating down on us all. And, they had us do it in a Ziploc bag. So it got all over my hands, and my hands were sticky, and I hate being sticky. So I asked one of the staff members, hey, can I at least go to the water fountain and wash my hands off a little bit because my hands are sticky. No, they wouldn't let you out, or they wouldn't let you back in. That was our time outside. So I made the most of it. And, I had a pretty decent time apart from having to deal with sticky hands. And then we go in. And, I'm hanging out with a few, girlfriends. No, I was not dating them. But a few of my girlfriends that, I was hanging out, especially Rebecca Curley. Shout out Rebecca Curley. And I was sitting there talking to her, and next thing you know, the whistle blows and we're going in. And I asked somebody in passing, where are we going? And they said lunch. So I was like, okay, we go to the lunchroom. Well, apparently that's not where everybody else was going. They were supposed to go back to homeroom. So I went and standed. Listen to me. I'm trying to get my words out. Stood in the lunch line. And the principal didn't put up nothing. She stayed in line with me, and I talked to her. And, honestly, this part was a little bit on me because I knew that there was nobody coming, so, instead of talking to her, I should have just got my stuff and then came into homeroom, but I didn't do it. And, about 5-10 minutes later, I take my tray back to a table. I set it there, and then I go to homeroom because I was like, well, that's probably where they're at. And I got a tongue lashing, and then my one-on-one teacher came. I was sitting. I had silent lunch for it. And she came and she was like, are you out of your mind? And I'm sitting here thinking, like, what? Am I out of my mind for somebody saying that we were going to lunch and me taking it, hey, we're going to lunch? If you're gonna get on to me and put me in silent lunch, you're gonna have to tell me what, where I'm supposed to go instead of just letting me, losing me in the crowd. Come on, man. You keep up with all your sighted kids. So what's the difference for blind people? You just gonna let them walk off? If your kid is depending on, some of your teachers, you gotta give the kid, the blind students, you gotta let them know that, you're the teacher and everything, and, but if you're not showing them, like, cause all that, let's face it, most of the sighted students in school, they're not thinking about, oh, well, what if this blind man gets lost or whatever? Or what if he doesn't know how to get to the next class? And somebody's not showing him that, or somebody's not telling him, hey, we're going to homeroom, or we're going to lunch, or we're going to recess, or whatever it is. And you don't let them know as your responsibility, or try to at least guide them or tell them, hey, we're going here. And then they could just follow, if they have a little bit of vision, they can follow the class. But that's something I think really needs to be discussed is, treatment in public schools. Because in 7th grade, that was when they started playing, like trying to get me out of going to field trips. Shout out to Miss Jordan Stone, by the way. Because in her class, I was, I had some good times in there, but this was definitely a time where, all this trying to get me out of field trips started. So, we were sitting in homeroom, before extensions. That was basically what you go to before your first your first class. But it was right before extensions, and they were passing out extension slips. Of course, I was always at the back table. I had my own table because, VI teachers and everybody would be over there, blah, 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 Scooby-Dooby-Doo. I personally think it was just another way for them to separate me from the students. That way, my teachers, one-on-one teachers, could deal with me, and they could deal with the rest of the class. But they were passing out permission slips, and of course, I have a little bit of vision, and I would have known if they would have put a paper on my table, because the table was dark. I would have been able to see if they would have put a white paper down there. But I didn't get one. And I checked and I double checked. And even back then I wasn't really careful with things. Like, I'd lose things easy, especially permission slips and stuff like that. But somehow I managed to get most of them to Mama. But this one I didn't have anything for, so I couldn't put it in my folder, or, I couldn't take it to Mama so she could turn it in. Well, the day comes to turn the permission slips in, and Miss Stone's sitting there like, Skyler, where's your permission slip? Where's your permission slip? And of course, if I said anything other than what they said I had done, or if they said I didn't turn in a permission slip, they'd go to my one-on-one teacher, and then she would know, and then by the end of the day, everybody in the school would know, hey, Skyler didn't turn in his permission slip. But you know what? Y'all didn't give me one, so don't play that card. Especially if another blind person comes to your school, comes to East Alexander Middle, please don't do them that way. So, of course, Miss Orem knew about it, and by the way, shout out Miss Orem. She did what she could, but Miss Orem knew about it. Of course, when I went into extension, she was like, Skyler, why didn't you turn in your permission slip? I said, I didn't have nothing to give. What was I supposed to do? Sit there and conjure a permission slip out of thin air? I'm blind, not a magician. So, that's how all that started. So my papaw went up there after I told them, because I told my mom and papaw that weekend, because they were about the only ones that would really believe me. And papaw went up there and told them that I was going to go to the field trip, and apparently they'd already went, or they'd already taken, students down, or whatever it was. But we all knew what it was. They just didn't want me to go. And then 8th grade was when everybody just started to be like, okay, we don't know how to teach him. We're just going to pull him out and let him go to Miss Orham's. And I'm sitting here like, I'm sitting here in just in a room with just Miss Orham. With all due respect, she did what she could, and she had everything brailled out. She never, even if she couldn't braille it out, she would read it out to me, and we would fill in the answers. But at that point, I didn't really give a crap about my education, because nobody apart from Miss Orham was taking it seriously. It was to the point where, I wouldn't do nobody would sit down with me like they did in elementary school and tell me, hey, this is how you do what, blah, 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 blah. And then, I would be sitting in all these classes in middle school, and they would just expect me to remember everything. And I'd be like, I didn't care at that point. Everybody was pulling me out. Why should I? And, at this point, I was still begging my mom to let me go to GMS, because I felt like if I would have been able to go there in 6th grade, my education would be a lot better than it is now. Even now. And I would have matured a lot faster if, in my opinion, I think I would have matured a lot faster if Mama would have just let go. But I think it was the fact that it was all the way in Raleigh, and we're in Taylorsville, and they was afraid something's gonna happen. What if you get sick? Blah 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 blah. But that's something you have to deal with anybody. So at the end of the day, I think it would have helped me, especially in those middle school years, because those were some of the hardest schooling years for me, simply because. And another thing, like, I had my moments of, getting in trouble and, doing things I shouldn't. I wasn't that wild, but, saying things I shouldn't. And I got in trouble accordingly. But there were times where people would just say stuff just to, say stuff to Miss Orham just to be saying it, and just to be like, hey, Skyler said this or that going down the hall. Or Skyler did this, and like, I would get, Miss Orham. Okay, so one thing that blind people in public schools can really attest to is having to carry around a heavy ass braille writer from class to class to class to class to class. Now, when you're at a blind school and you've got braille writers in every room, and you got braille paper, and you usually have a notebook, and you just stuff the notes in your binder, and then you would have them as notes. So in public schools, it was a lot different because you had to carry the braille writer from class to class to class to class to class. Band and chorus was one of the only classes I didn't have to keep my braille writer on me all the time. But there was this one day in 7th grade where I accidentally, because I got pulled out for, I think it was math. Yeah, that was my third period. So I got pulled out for math, and then, I had band and then chorus, and then 4th block. Well, when it come time for 4th block or social studies with Miss Treadway, I had left the braille writer in Miss Orm's room. So, Miss Orm's room wasn't, well, no, that was 8th grade. But I had to go to Miss Orm's room, and then Miss Orm's room was locked, so I couldn't get the braille writer, and I had to go all the way back there and tell her that the room was locked. So, of course, by the end of the day, Miss Orm knows about it, and then my mom knows about it. And that night, I think it was Papaw that picked me up, and I told Papaw, I said, I was so upset because nobody would believe me ever. Just if they, even if I was, guilty in some cases, like they would over exaggerate, and then either that or they would try to pin something on me and make get me in trouble for something that I was, either I didn't do or I was, I don't, either that I did and they just over exaggerated, or I didn't and they would do something and make something up to make me look like, oh, the blind guy just doesn't, make me look like I was somehow different than everybody else. And by the time I hit 8th grade, everybody was pulling me out. So I'd get 1st block, and then 2nd block I'd be sitting, I'd social studies with Miss Roseman. That was the only class. Well, I got pulled out several times, but that was the only class I was actually in most of the time. And, English, of course. And then eventually got to where, most of my teachers would just pull me out and be like, hey, you're going to Miss Orm's. And especially math, Shout out Miss Stafford. She was a really good teacher, but, she just, I don't know. She probably felt like she couldn't teach me or whatever. She didn't really know how to teach me, but, nowadays you could just jump on a computer or iPad or whatever and do it that way. But all that stuff was just starting to take off back then. So they would just pull me out, and that, I didn't have those resources. I didn't have an iPad just laying around. And the stuff I did have, I was just getting used to it at the time, like talk back, stuff like that. So they were pulling me out because I think they didn't know how to teach me the right way or teach me with the rest of the class. And at that point, I didn't give a crap about my education anyway. So when GMS, when I actually started at GMS, I was really slacking because at that point, I had moved to another school, but I was still getting taught like how to well, I had to figure out a lot of it. And then, GMS, the staff helped me along the way, but then, I would go to the learning center and sit and learn with them. And then, I think it was my 11th grade year that I started actually trying to put forth an effort worth a crap. So, yeah, you could tell, like, coming from 8th grade into 9th grade, you could tell I really didn't give a 10 shit about my education. That's the only way I know how to explain it. And if I'm being honest with you, I probably should have stayed a few more years at GMS because I think they have that as an option. And I should have taken it, but here we are. But this conversation goes just beyond what I've gone through. There's plenty of other blind people that's gone through the same thing or been treated the same way in public schools. And this needs to stop. This needs to be we've got to draw attention to that because there are some teachers in there that know what they're doing. Shout out Miss Orem. She didn't know much about being blind or braille or nothing, but she stepped right into it gracefully, and she learned how to work an embosser, and she had everything embossed that I needed embossed. Shout out to Mr. Crooks. He was a very, very, very helpful teacher in my 8th grade year. He was one of the only ones that, I rarely got pulled out for him because he would always work with me. Except on, if we were doing something like Kahoot with the, on the websites and stuff. I really didn't know how to do that at the time. So, and then when I started catching on to it, I would be like, well, what button do I press? And they would be like, hey, press that. And I would just do it that way. So, Mr. Crooks and Elijah, shout out Elijah Kerrigan, I think it is. Elijah Kerrigan. So, he came in one day. Or no, it was either Elijah or Mr. Crooks that came in with the board, the Google board, the cardboard, Google Cardboard. That's it. But they were supposed to be virtual reality goggles, but we downloaded an app. We downloaded an app called Nearsighted VR Augmented Aid. And that app basically allowed you to see with them glasses. They would, you'd put your phone in the, where your phone would go in the thing and close it up and set it on that app, and it would basically, you'd be able to see everything. And I remember doing that for the first time. Like, Miss Orem, that was one of the times she agreed with, me just going around the school and showing everybody. And I remember going to my brother's classroom, and I'm pulling my brother out, and I told him that that his eyes were blue, and I don't think Caden ever forgot that. And even like on the bus, we would take the EC bus. They had me on the EC bus. Can you believe that? So, when we would get on the EC bus during that time, Caden would take his phone and he would put it on there and let me see it. And he would let me do all this stuff and walk around with his phone. And we got up to the house that night that I got it, and at the time I didn't have a functioning phone. I mean I did, but it had broke at the time. So I was having to use Caden's, and tack nab if my luck didn't crumble when it came, because 3 years, no, not 3 years, 5 years, 4 years after that happened, because that was 2016. I got them back out in 2020, and I was like, okay, I got a phone. Let's check this shit out. See how good it is now that I'm able to have my own phone and walk around and do stuff like this. So we got it. Well, I got them out, and every daggone one of them broke. The plastic one that Elijah had got me, I think the tray broke on it or something, and it wouldn't hold my phone in. I was like, what the heck? I mean, Mamaw had got me a VR gaming headset, but you couldn't really. There wasn't a camera thing where you could put your camera and see out of it, so that was not made for that. So I haven't really been able to try it since. But that was one of the better experiences of being in public school, was having Mr. Crooks and him testing my vision. Like, we would go in there and I would put these goggles on and they would do tests, like they do with the eye doctor. Say what letter this is or whatever, blah, 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 Scooby-Dooby-Doo. They'd run all them tests on me, and they had got my vision down to 2080, and my vision's 2800. And that blew my mind back then, because that was a teacher that was actually dedicated to helping me. And that meant a lot to me. And honestly, it was hard to let him go, especially because, I mean, at that point I knew I was going to GMS for the 9th grade year. By the way, Mama, why did you wait until the 9th grade year to send me? I mean, come on. I begged you for years. Oh, man. But at that point, I knew I was going to GMS, and, I really do I miss talking to him, even now. Like, he would he was crazy about science. Like, he loved doing science experiments. And he was supposed to have something that they were going to test out on the last day, but it didn't work out. And at the time it really hurt, because that was the only teacher that really, well, not the only one, but one of the only teachers in that school that actually would sit down and do stuff like that. And I've talked a lot of negative stuff about East, but there was some good times in public school. There was, at the top, or I was at the top of the, I was always having people ask me to play drums for them. I was getting well known at that. And I remember playing Born to Be Wild for the first time, because, in 6th and 7th grade, I was trying to get to the drum set. If they had a drum set up, I was always trying to bring it. I was gonna get on there, because that was before I had a drum set personally, and I didn't run across them that often, so I would get on there and slay when I could. So we had this thing called band jam. Was it band night or band jam? Band jam. Shout out Miss Hudson if you're still around. Yeah, check out this podcast. Shout out Miss Alexander. Shout out Miss Alexander. So we had this thing called Jam Night. And oh gosh, what's her name? Kim, I think it is. Kim, yeah. So we would always have somebody to jam with, or somebody from the high school that was going to teach us a little something they knew. So she started teaching me the high school cadence. The OG high school cadence. And she said I was one of the fastest learners to ever do that thing. She said I'd sat down and learned it in an hour. It was, at least the basic parts of it. There were some adjustments that I needed to make, but eventually I got it down pat. And that was one of the most surreal experiences, just being 7th grade and being able to play something that complicated. And I think what it was is I was already into metal, Avenged Sevenfold at the time, and they were already doing complicated drum patterns and stuff, with the double bass and stuff. I think I caught on to it because it was complicated, but it was a march, and it was cool to learn that. So in one of the concerts that year, I think it was because I kept asking her so much, but I forget if it was Miss Alexander or Miss Hudson that seventh year. It was Miss Hudson. I think Miss Alexander started it and then Miss Hudson finished it. But we got in there or we got in the concert, and I asked her, hey, I think it was Miss Alex. Yeah, it was Miss Alexander. And I asked her, hey, can I do the high school cadence as a solo during the concert? Kind of show off a little bit. Cause I was a show off. Let's not get confused here. Back then, I was just a little show off. I was trying to show that I could play. I would sit there and try to make like metal beats on just a snare drum. And thinking I was, one of the best, but I really wasn't. I had rhythm and stuff down, but I really wasn't thinking about control, stuff like that. So, but I learned fast when it came to the band class, and that was one of the few classes I actually gave a damn about. Be honest with you, in middle school, because I am a musician at heart, and I love even if it was just I love how the band, the middle school and high school band would take popular songs. I think the 8th graders at the time were doing Gangnam Style, because that was the popular song at the time, and I haven't heard that song in years, telling you, man. So the 6th graders, 7th graders would do Born to Be Wild, and I loved when we did it, because there was a time when I would go tour east, and I heard the band playing Born to Be Wild, and I was like, and this was in my 5th grade year, and I'm sitting there like, I'm gonna be there one day. I'm gonna be in that classroom playing that song. And I eventually did. And man, I'm trying to think of some good memories of middle school and elementary school. Elementary school was, I think the teachers were fair in elementary school. It wasn't really until middle school I started getting a lot of pushback from going on field trips and stuff, unless I had a chaperone or whatever. And so 4th grade, man, shout out Miss Houston. 3rd grade, like, we'd play this game called Quiz Show, and it would basically, I think you could choose like what subject you were teaching or trying to quiz somebody on. And I didn't really get to do it much. I mean, I got to sit and, choose the answers, but I didn't really get to get on, I mean, I did several times, but I didn't get to get on, and actually push the answers. But every time somebody said Quiz Show, everybody got excited because they loved it. Miss Houston, I was telling you about Miss Houston. I would sit with her at the lunch table, and we would talk about Credence. We would talk about all kinds of stuff. And for Christmas that year in 4th grade, she brought me a bunch of tapes because she knew I loved recording cassette tapes at the time. And I would, oh man, Those were some good times, man. Fifth grade, I had first and fifth grade classes with Miss Robinson. Shout out to Miss Robinson. I really want to get her on the podcast one day. But Miss Robinson was instrumental in making sure I had stuff, especially in her classes. But she would always make sure I had what I needed. And she like I said, she was one of the teachers that really strived for me to be able to do like anybody else in that classroom. And she would sit with me on occasions, and then sometimes she'd let me do the work when everybody else was doing it, and I wouldn't get pulled out so much, mainly because it was just one class all day. And then, but she knew how to teach me. And if she didn't know it, she would try to figure it out and be like, okay, this is how. And then, especially when I started using the Braille note in fifth grade, where she could monitor my work. They had me hooked up to a monitor in the classroom, and I could take notes just like anybody else. But see, then as far as that goes, being blind, you can't screw around with, playing around with different stuff, because they could read whatever you had on the screen. So you had to be really careful when it came to that shit. And, the Braille note, Natasha talked about it on the second episode. And, man, the Braille note was a life changer. I will say I had the Apex. This was way before the Braille Note Touch. Way before, Android met the Braille Note. So, it was still a life changer. It was, a word processor, planner, all that stuff rolled up into one bag, or rolled up into one product, I should say. And it was easier for my teachers to get my work, because all I had to do was set, a monitor and a printer up where I could get this done, and Miss Dubow wouldn't have to come in every single time I was doing work and translate. I could just give the print paper, and then they could see it and grade thus. So it was a life changer. And then sixth grade, I think we started out with the Braille note, and then my Braille note at the time, it was constantly, the space bar was constantly coming off of it, because the buttons were flimsy in a way. Like, you had to be really careful with them. That's one thing I remember about the Braille note. Like, some of the keys would mess up sometimes, or the space bar would come off, and then we'd have to send it back in to get it fixed, and it would take forever, so I had to use my Braille writer. And then when I finally got it back, I think for the 7th and 8th grade year, it did well. But that was a life changer as far as that goes, because not only could I start, doing things without everybody hearing, the typing noise of my braille writer, but if I was doing anything I shouldn't have been doing on the braille note, or I was just goofing off and not really paying attention, they would know, because they could read on that screen. They could be like, "Hey, what have you got so far?" And they could look up on the screen and say, "Hey, you didn't do this, 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 and this." So yeah, elementary school was good. Middle school was all right. I mean, there was some low points, there was some high points. I had some good friends there, friends I still have, and if there's one thing I've learned from all of this, from just being in those positions, is that you start to realize how valuable all this stuff is. So, my buddy Dylan says, you should go to a school for the blind wherever they are in your area. What I think so too. I honestly think if you're gonna, especially if you're in a small town and you don't really have the resources to help a blind person get what they need done, I honestly think it would be better for you to send them to a school for the blind. That way they can get education on their level. I really do advocate for that, because as much as I loved some of the things I did in public school, I think I would have loved it even more if I would have been able to, do some of this stuff on my level with people around me that were fellow blind people, that had various degrees of blindness. And just like with deaf schools, or with deaf schools, like if you're deaf and you're not getting the education that you deserve at a public school, because not many people want to work with you, or not, they don't want to sit and figure out how to do sign language or everything. Same thing with blind people. We've all got to think about what, and even if public schools, if you're hearing this, we've got to figure out how to help blind people if they come into your school. If you don't have accommodations for them already, try to figure out the best way you can do it. Like Mrs. Robinson, like Miss Houston, like Miss Crooks, Miss Walker, Elizabeth Walker. Anybody, Mr. Crooks. Anybody of that, that would step up and really try to help people with disabilities, blindness, deafness, whatever the case is. I think we all need that chance. And that's what this series is about for me. It's showing the fun side. It's showing the not so fun side. What we all go through as blind individuals on a daily basis. And it's sad to say that, a lot of blind people are still living with their parents. And that's nothing against their parents, don't get me wrong. But there is eventually gonna come a time where the parents aren't around. What are you gonna do then? If you're stuck with your parents and you never get out, you never can get out. I had to wait on this for 3 years. So, if that doesn't show you anything, like, I was extremely lucky. I am extremely lucky to be doing this podcast for y'all. And it's because of that. Because of, all them job rejections. All of the good, bad, and ugly, and in between. It led to this point. And see what I'm trying to drive home. What I'm trying to get through all of y'all, through y'all's heads, and anybody's head that is watching this. We all, blind, deaf, dumb, whatever you are, we all have a chance to, we all need a chance to live. To be able to live our lives and be able to say we've experienced things and not have to, just be, not have to be, in your 30s and still living with your parents and being, we need to be able to teach our blind kids, parents. We all need to learn how to teach our blind kids how to live and how to function on their own, because the hard truth is you're not going to always be there. That's one of the main things I really want to get across to you in this podcast, because there's not a lot of people willing to take a chance on blind people. And as we've discussed in the past few episodes, it's not just in North Carolina. It's not just in Taylorsville. If you looked in the population of Taylorsville, there'd probably only be about 2 or 3 blind people. And when every blind person you see is still living with their parents or their grandparents and stuff, I mean, like I said, it's nothing against the parents, but we're meant for something more than just having to stay home because no job will hire us, or nobody will dare to take a chance on us. So if you see a blind person in your area, treat them as you would a sighted person. Treat them as you would anybody else passing along. Just because they're different or they don't see like you do, don't take them for granted, because my family, that they've always been very supportive of anything I've done, and some families don't have, some people don't have that. Some people's families just, but just because they're blind, they think, oh, well, he can't hold a job, or she can't, hold heavy objects or something like that, or he can't stock shelves. Salvation Army. I mean, come on, man. We all talk about unity and equality, but from what I've seen, we throw our blind people under the bus. And it's ridiculous, man. There needs to be something set in place, like I mean, even in public schools, in the workplaces, we need to have some form of, if somebody with a disability comes into your shop or into your restaurant and wants a job, if you don't have somebody who's trained to work with them, take it upon yourself to learn from them. That's something I want to push big time. Get some advice from somebody who's been blind, who's been in a blind community before, knows how to function within one. Instead of just pushing them off to the side because, we think this is too dangerous for you. You never know if it's too dangerous until you get them in there. That doesn't prove anything just shoving them to the side. That doesn't allow them to prove anything to anybody else. So, McDonald's, they was going to have me mop the floors. I honestly think I would have been a good order taker. But I was trying to get a job, and my mama's friend wanted me, was talking to the people in there, and I put an application in, I think January of 2019, because I was trying to at least get a job set up where I could go to school during the week and then come back and make a little bit of money. But that didn't work out because they was dragging their feet. You know how jobs do. Any blind people people that I've had on the show, they can all attest to this. It's just jobs that we're interested in dragging their feet because they don't know what to do with blind people, and they don't want to tell you up front that they don't want you because they're worried about the liabilities or how much money they'll lose or what if you get hurt. All that bullshit. And it is bullshit. Let's call a spade, okay? This should be a time where, Disability Awareness Month should be a time where we all stop and think not only about blind people, but anybody with a disability that's getting crapped on by, just not being able to do like normal people do. So, Disability Awareness Month is coming to a close. And by the time this comes out, it'll already be November. So, for those of you who don't know, since I started the Blind Lives Matter series, this is going to be, I think this episode is going to be called Disability Awareness Month. But this upcoming Friday or Monday, dagnabbit, I'm getting everything confused and mixed up. But this upcoming Monday, I'm going to have one of my nearest and dearest friends from GMS get on the podcast. Her name is Margaret. And that is going to be the last podcast episode for Disability Awareness Month. So keep on the lookout for that. And by the way, if any of you guys want to get on the podcast, blindsided, whatever, y'all want to get on here and just talk or whatever, feel free to, man. Just, hit me up. We could do it through a call. We could do it in person, depending on where you're at. And we'll have a good time. We will have a good time. And once again, I just want to thank everybody for spreading these Blind Lives Matter podcasts out like you have. I mean, the results. The one with Natasha was getting like 40, 50 views in a single friggin' day. So let's try to keep that up. Especially for the one with Margaret. I want everybody to watch that one. And go back and watch. If you haven't watched any of the other Blind Lives Matter episodes, go back and watch it. As a matter of fact, go back and watch everything on Skyler Jarvis Media. But that goes without saying. I think this is the longest boss rant I've done so far. So, man, Halloween. Today's Halloween. That's one thing I really want to bring up, But, yeah, Halloween's coming. We went to a party at Brushy on the 26th. And I got the funniest costume. I won the funniest costume because I wore a killer clown suit. And I couldn't see through the mask walking around Brushy, and I didn't want to knock into everybody, so I just took the mask off and walked around with the rest of the suit on. So I guess that's why I got the funniest costume. But I seen a lot of my friends there. Me and my aunt went with us. Shout out Justin. Shout out Victor. Shout out all y'all. If you're watching the podcast, shout out, man. Shout out. Shout out to Chris Canella, by the way. Shout out him and Ben Justice from Hillbilly Hemp have got a podcast going. And I fully intend to get on that sometime in the future. Just got to find the right time for it. Yeah, I would love to be on y'all's podcast. And, I would really work on trying to get it, on other platforms whenever y'all can. I mean, stick to Facebook, until you get the gist of it. And then once you feel like you can start, recording stuff for YouTube, and, or take a little bit of lessons from Carson. I don't know. But y'all are doing really good with the podcast. I know it's going to get better than what it is now. I mean, it's good now, but I know it's going to get better. And keep it up, Chris. Keep it up, man. Keep it up. So, without further ado, I think I'm going to wrap this one up. Again, I want to thank everybody for supporting this show. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with your friends. Have them subscribe. That way we get the word around. But this is Skyler Jarvis signing off. Peace!
Ladies and gentlemen, Skyler has left the building. Hey, bro, don't you want to say anything?